Zelenskyy confirms energy ceasefire. What's really happening and Trump's role? We will talk about this with Andriy Dobriansky, Director of Communications and Media at the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Andriy, glad to see you and thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me.
Andriy, Volodymyr Zelenskyy has confirmed the establishment of an energy ceasefire. He stated the following: the teams discussed the energy ceasefire in the Emirates. We expect the agreements to be upheld. Thank you, President Trump. However, the most interesting part is what Peskov said. Russia has agreed to refrain from strikes on Ukraine until February 1st, allegedly to create favorable conditions for negotiations. But after February 1st, Ukraine will be hit by severe frost, and it is obvious that Russia will take advantage of this and continue striking energy infrastructure in order to freeze us completely. What kind of so-called ceasefire is this, and what is its purpose, in your opinion?
Well, I don't really consider this to be a ceasefire, given the fact that the Russian side admitted yesterday that they were not interested in a ceasefire. They finally acceded to, in the last 12 hours, that they will abide by President Trump's request. It's not very clear what they consider that request to be, but we do know that it will not be for a week like President Trump asked for. It'll be less than that. And that we're not very sure which areas they consider to be targets or not, as we know that various locations were hit in Ukraine after President Trump announced this so-called ceasefire. So what it is a rhetorical flourish from the Russian side, trying to manipulate the words of President Trump, as they have every single time after a negotiation with President Trump and President Putin. They have fired on Ukraine. Similarly, they are trying to show, not just to the world, but to President Trump himself, that even if they agree to this kind of proposed ceasefire, they're going to keep attacking Ukraine no matter what.
Andriy, what monitoring mechanisms can be applied to document compliance with or violations of agreements concerning energy infrastructure? What sanctions or political pressure mechanisms should exist to influence a party that, for example, violates the terms of an energy infrastructure ceasefire?
Well, Ukraine has proposed an energy ceasefire, or specifically a ban on shooting on locations that are against international law, such as energy power plants, but especially nuclear power plants. This is something that Ukraine has proposed going as far back as 2022 to the international community. Within that proposal, there was a request to have international monitors. The problem is that for some of these areas, it's very difficult for international monitors to travel into. We've seen that difficulty by the IAEA. We've seen that with numerous international bodies, some of which are more reticent about traveling to Ukraine during this extreme cold. It's not something that you're going to have a lot of volunteers from different European nonprofits go out and stay in Ukraine during these temperatures. So it's an inherent paradox to try to have monitors at the worst time for Ukraine as far as the season.
Andriy, and we see during the so-called energy truce, the Russian army shifted its attacks to logistics. According to President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president says there were no strikes on energy facilities last night, but yesterday afternoon, our energy infrastructure in several regions was hit. We are now observing a shift by the Russian army toward strikes on logistics. So what's next, and how do these, again, continued attacks reflect Russia's disregard for ceasefire agreements or international norms?
Well, number one, we understand that Russia is not going to stop attacking Ukraine. They're simply going to stop or pause some attacks on certain areas, very limited areas. On the second, in addition to that, we know that Russians' ballistic missile stockpile has dwindled down. And right now, they are not firing missiles that they have had in storage for many months, many years. Right now, some of the missiles that are being discovered, the parts of missiles that land in Ukraine, Ukrainian investigators have documented that many of them have been manufactured just in the last couple of weeks. This indicates that Russia is at the point where they are trying to keep up with their ballistic attacks, trying to keep up their inventory. It's possible that a pause is actually helping Russia in some way by letting them stockpile a few more missiles at a time, so that when they unleash their full barrage, it's more frightening, more devastating against Ukraine. And then, so in a way, a limited ceasefire like this can actually help Russia in some ways.
Zelenskyy criticized Western partners for delays in the delivery of air defense systems, stating that this had led to problems with electricity supply in Ukraine. According to him, the United States did not deliver the missiles on time due to payment delays on the part of Europe. What lessons should be drawn to avoid similar coordination failures in future defense assistance packages? What mechanisms can exist to ensure timely coordination between the United States and European partners on air defense funding and deliveries?
Well, first of all, President Zelenskyy is involved in high-level negotiations with multiple parties. So what he can do is express to the world and his population what exactly is happening, which is that their Patriot batteries, their air defense batteries stand ready. They simply don't have any missiles and material to put inside them. But he is not condemning the world. He is pointing out to the world. However, it's incumbent on us outside of Ukraine to point out that countries like the United States, countries in Europe as well, they have cut and run. They initially sent supplies to Ukraine, but especially in 2025, we've seen almost nothing come out of the United States, the richest, most powerful country in the world, that's waiting on other countries to pay it so that it can help an ally. We constantly remind Americans, especially in the United States Congress and Senate, that 44,000 Ukrainian service members served in NATO areas in countries far away from Ukraine. Ukrainians died on the battlefield next to Americans. And in this instance, the United States is waiting for money before it helps its ally defend its home territory. Many people here in the United States just starts condemning that openly because what's happening is that the United States is allowing civilians to die when we have the resources to send more of these missiles, more of these surface-to-air missiles, defensive missiles to protect Ukraine, especially the Patriots. So we hope that gets resolved going forward, because in this case, like President Zelenskyy said, Ukraine is ready. It's simply that the system it knows has been purchased have not been delivered yet.
And about Abu Dhabi, yes, President's special envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, will not take part in the next round of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. This was announced on January 28th. By Secretary of State Marco Rubio. At the same time, he noted that the participation of U.S. representatives in this round of talks remains possible. However, Rubio did not specify which Americans would travel to Abu Dhabi to engage in discussions with Ukrainian and Russian representatives. Why are the United States changing their delegation, and what should Ukraine expect from the new round of negotiations? How do you think?
Yeah, it was a little surprising when Secretary Rubio was testifying in front of the Senate committee. This is the first time he's testified in over 9 months. And we got some information. In fact, the chairman, Senator Rich, said he thought that possibly that was news, that Marco Rubio was announcing that Americans would not be taking part in the trilateral talks, that they would be bilateral on Sunday. And that in his mind, Marco Rubio stated that he thought that many of the points have been already worked out. It's simply incumbent upon the parties to work out whatever they're going to be satisfied in terms of working out a deal, if there is territory to be occupied or not, occupied further. Sorry. And so it's not very clear why the United States would take itself out if it wasn't very clear why they inserted themselves into a trilateral process to begin with. Until the process is finished, you would think that the trilateral parties would stay together and make sure that this is resolved. It's also not clear that the parties that Russia sent to represent it in Abu Dhabi are ones that can make decisions. In fact, we've seen numerous times before that the dictator Putin, has decided to change his negotiating partners, as opposed to the people that President Trump has selected. These are the same people that have been at the table since Saudi Arabia last year. working on separate talks with the different parties. Ukraine has a very serious team that it has sent numerous times to Florida, numerous times to different locations to discuss the further treatment of the war and how we get to a ceasefire. And here we have a team from Russia that's not really been staffed with any ministers, nobody at a high level, and it makes me question whether anything that is agreed to by this team ends up working out at all.
According to Marco Rubio, the central and currently the only unresolved issue in the negotiations remains the territorial question. We understand this, specifically which side will ultimately control the Donetsk region. According to sources cited by the Financial Times, in the event that Ukrainian forces withdraw from areas of the Donetsk region currently under Kyiv's control, Washington would preliminarily be prepared to increase arms supplies to the Ukrainian armed forces in peacetime. At the same time, the publication notes that it remains unclear whether the United States would assume any formal commitments. The White House has denied this information. So what security guarantees could the United States offer Ukraine regardless of the issue of Donbass? Your thoughts?
Well, I believe the serious discussion and question that remains unresolved, the Americans can say that it's about territory in Ukraine, but it's a very big question about who from other countries will be on the ground in Ukraine. What soldiers, what representatives from other countries will be on the ground in Ukraine, either as monitors, as peacekeepers, who will be inspecting the front line, who will be making sure that there are no incursions coming from the enemy onto further Ukrainian territory. So that's a big question. And then the other question is the same question that we had in 2015, the same issue that was never resolved after the second Minsk agreement, which is what is the sequence of any of these events? Is it the case that Ukraine agrees along with the other countries at one meeting and everybody signs off? In that case, when are the different parliaments and the United States Senate supposed to vote on this? Because as President Zelenskyy has made clear, this will not be a signatory agreement just like the Budapest Memorandum. This will have to be not just accepted by the Ukrainian people through their parliament, but the United States needs to ratify this through the United States Senate, which makes it on the level of federal law. Meaning that any president who decides to not support Ukraine would be violating federal law because the agreement would have been ratified by the Senate. But when would that happen? Is that something that happens very quickly after the signing of the agreement? Is that something that we have to wait months for to actually happen? And again, we get back into the situation that we had after the second Minsk agreement, which is not being very clear about what the next steps are because neither party has agreed to the sequence of events. Mm-hmm.
Ukraine has stated that President Zelenskyy is prepared to personally discuss issues of territorial control and the operation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant with Russian dictator Volodymyr Putin. Putin's aide, Yuri Ushakov, said that if Zelenskyy wants to meet with Putin, he can come to Moscow. A Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, made a similar statement. We understand that a meeting in Moscow is not possible and it's absurd. However, could a meeting potentially take place in another city? In which country?
Well, we know that this could have happened last year in Istanbul in May of 2025. President Zelenskyy was ready to meet back then because President Trump asked him. It has simply been the dictator, Putin, who's decided not to travel to other locations. This is why any potential meeting with Putin is up in the air. He's only traveled to Alaska and he's not traveled to other locations. This is very much represents a person who is scared from leaving his compound, from leaving his bunkers. He is not confident enough to be on other territory, and we will see what happens. We also know that he will not be traveling to any international conferences so far, the G20, et cetera. It's all a question about whether he is comfortable or not, and he is clearly scared of traveling to other locations. So it's not a question of President Zelenskyy, who has said he is ready to travel anywhere, anytime. Obviously, the question of the territory of Moscow being a dictatorship one that is currently occupying several independent nations within Russia, not giving the people of many nationalities their own freedom. Why would one travel to that location at the same time that they are bombing Ukraine? So it's very much something that stands in line with everything that Zelenskyy has said. But in the end, this all relies on President Trump trying to convince President Putin to do something. And to this day, he has not been able to do that.
The president of Ukraine stated that the next meeting between Ukraine and Russia may be postponed due to the situation surrounding Iran. What is the current situation in Iran, and how might it impact regional and global security?
The current situation in Iran is that the United States has deployed additional strike groups off in the Indian Ocean, available to strike at Iran if need be. President Trump has been shown several different plans were he to choose strikes. We do remember that President Trump at the beginning of the protests said that the United States will back them up. They have not backed them up with a lot of material to this point. So it's a question of whether the United States will have any strike capability against members of the Iranian government, perhaps at parts of their airports, any part of the Iranian government that they could degrade significantly through an aerial strike. They're not planning to send people on the ground in Iran. And this has led to many more alerts by American diplomatic staff to people traveling in the area, alerting their ally countries not to have people in the area in case something were to happen. So we're very, very much in a waiting position now to see if some kind of coordinated strike campaign between the United States and Israel and perhaps other partners were to happen while Iran is killing reportedly tens of thousands of its own people.
And in your opinion, how might rising tensions between the United States and Iran affect the diplomatic environment for Ukraine-Russia negotiations?
As we've seen in Syria, as we've seen in Venezuela, as we've seen in other partner countries of Russia, Russia continues to be involved in with most of those countries' economy. Russia is the one who coordinates the shadow fleet system for those countries. Well, Venezuela has been taken out of the shadow fleet system for now, but it's still Russia who is running the economy and the shadow fleet. So therefore, anything that happens in Iran, which is a significant supplier to the shadow fleet system of illicit oil trade, that would be a big concern, just as the change of administration in Syria was. So we will see how Russia responds to the potential collapse of that nation. It will not come to its defense. But of course, we should understand that Russia is in no way a trustful partner for the rest of the world, and they will do whatever they can, whether after the fact or maybe even making it more difficult during the fact of a regime change in Iran, by making sure that it is difficult for the West to do what it wants in terms of helping the people of Iran, and therefore tying up resources in another location, which makes it a perfect time to strike against Ukraine.
Trump declared a state of emergency in the United States due to a threat from Cuba. In the directive published by the White House, it was stated that the decision was made because of risks to the country's national security. What specific threats from Cuba prompt the U.S. to declare a state of emergency?
Well, one of the things cited in that presidential order was the fact that Cuba continues to work with Russia. Very interesting. Russia is a negotiating partner right now where the United States is sitting across from them, and yet President Trump is signing memorandums that cite that working with Russia is a problem for the United States. So it has to do with the intelligence services being shared. It has to do with the further after effects of the president of Venezuela being removed by the United States. As we all know, the illicit trade between Venezuela and Russia included Cuba as well. So now that Venezuela has been changed in some way, we know that the personnel are the same, but we know that they are moving quickly to change their trade relations based on the United States forcing them to. And so therefore, that has affected the Cuban economy significantly. We know that Cuba is not receiving as many financial support from Russia as it did in the past. It is very much possible that without Venezuela and Russia propping up the government in Cuba, the matter of unrest in Cuba might increase in the coming months as well.
And about Greenland, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that Russia has approached the United Nations with a request to recognize, by analogy with Greenland, the right to self-determination of the peoples of Donbass, Novorossiya and Crimea. Meanwhile, the president of Ukraine emphasized that the Greenland case is a very specific historical example which could be used tomorrow as a pretext to take away Ukrainian territories and have it recognized de jure. Now, how likely is the international community to consider the Greenland precedent applicable in the Ukrainian context?
Well, it's very much something that the majority of countries do not want to see, which is the change of sovereignty by force from other countries. This is something that has been made clear by African countries after the full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. This is very much made clear by smaller nations around the world. The United Nations represents the voices of over 190 countries working together. However, many of those are very, very small countries. They do not have militaries. They do not have the available forces to defend their sovereignty. If a larger country were to threaten it with nuclear weapons, threaten it with an armed invasion, what prevents that from happening are the international accords, is the UN Charter. And when we start talking about sovereignty as something that could be traded away, even, for instance, during the negotiations where Russia is demanding more territory be given to it as a trade, as opposed to what President Zelenskyy and the people of different countries have repeatedly stated, which is it is not one person's decision about what their borders are. It is their constitution that they all agree to. And therefore, I don't think you'll find a majority of countries in the General Assembly or even in the Security Council that would support any takeover of sovereign territory, any transfer of sovereign territory at this time. It might change if China gets more imperialistic with Taiwan or Manchuria, but we'll see what happens in the future.
And Andriy, finally, one more question. I see that American physiotherapist Adam James stated that Trump has at most 4 months left to live, sitting 1 minute frontotemporal dementia. The expected life span after diagnosis is approximately 7 to 12 years. According to James, symptoms were observable even before Trump won the 2016 election. Their ability to conceal his true condition is effective only to a certain extent. However, what are currently being reported by anonymous sources from the White House or possibly by Trump's inner circle, what is being covered in the media?
Accusations about President's health change day to day. We all know the bruising on his hands. We know the slurring of his speech. We know that his legs have been very swollen. And you see him even in his press conferences and his appearances sitting more than standing. So it's not quite clear what's happening with his physical condition. We know that he has had more than one annual physical in the year of 2025. He has magnetic scans of his body done. We are not getting a lot of information about that, much like we did not get information about what people considered the state of President Biden's health. However, I think to make the accusations that some of these people are making are a bit much. It doesn't negate the fact that we should, as Americans, and even the world should know the status of the health of this president. This president is probably less transparent about his health than any other president prior to him. We do not get the results of the annual physical. We do not get. We do not have a clear understanding of his health. However, if we're talking about frontotemporal dementia, it's a very serious condition. In fact, one of our biggest movie stars is currently suffering through that, Bruce Willis. And it's a very important condition. And if people are interested in that, they should really find out more about that condition, because it might be something that their family members are suffering from. It is a condition that often goes undiagnosed. So so I hope, if anything, this brings attention to a condition that people can discover within their own family and find treatment for it.
Andriy, heartfelt thank you for joining us today for this meaningful conversation and for unwavering support for Ukraine and Ukrainian people. So, guys, Andriy Dobriansky, Director of Communications and Media at the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, shared his insights with us. Please share this interview and continue standing with Ukraine. Thank you so much and see you.